Hey guys, MrPokke here. So NT has finally released their first ever limited S rank male agent that is going to be Chaos, who is going to be performing the role of a Lakshana main DPS. If you're somebody that has skipped one of the two previous main DPS, such as for example Nanali as well as Lacrimosa, and you are looking for a first or maybe even second main DPS team, especially with the Lakshana element, then Chaos is definitely going to be right up on that caliber. So for today, we will be exploring his kit, build arc dupes as well as team compositions, and without further ado, let's just jump straight into the guide. So for Chaos' kit is actually really simplistic to use, where he's going to be performing as the on-field main DPS for Lakshana, having two main ways of damage output, which is going to be his passive Remora burst as well as the enhanced heavy attacks from the full crime charge. And the result, Harder will bring incredible synergy due to the Remora extension, which directly works with passive Justice in Time, which will increase his damage multiplier all the way up by 300% for each additional second, which is why if you were to bring Hardcore, the damage from this passive can easily triple if not go even higher. And then besides this, because it will only trigger on the Remora passive, the downtime will be covered by his ultimate because it will increase his crime obtain rate, which allows him to cast his enhanced basic attack as fast as possible. This enhanced basic is really important because you want to use this enhanced basic to unlock a 1000 crime, which is going to unlock final verdict, which will consume all crimes to perform an additional attack. So you can see from this bar right here, if it does not have the bar at maximum rateness, the site is not going to open, and if you do get it at 1000 out of 1000 crime, then it is going to unlock the second hit over here. For the overall basic chain animations, for a full basic attack combo, it will build up 300 crime, and one critical reproach can be the parry at 100 crime, and a plunge attack at 30, which is pretty much going to be ignored. So generally speaking, in normal circumstances, you will only get this more than 3 full basic attack combo, which is actually very slow. That is why ultimate is extremely important, because it will give you 150 crime per second. And that will pretty much cover Chaos' very simplistic battle kit. So for his global passive, we're going to be using him for exploration. You cannot summon his Hound in the open world to add as a TP point anywhere in the map, which can go all the way up to 3 with his life skill upgrade. So this can be seen from the Ashen Shade. You can also toggle the G to wear his mask on and off, so that's just a little bit of a quality of life. And another quality of life, which is going to be this Fishing Master Angler, which will unlock from level 1 all the way through to level 5, especially for players who want to use fishing as their way of spending the city stamina. So regarding his build, Street Boxer 4-piece is going to be the best in slot with 10% Lakshana damage as well as 14% crit chance, while increasing that bonus to 40% for 20 seconds upon triggering Remora, which is perfect for Chaos because he does want to gain an additional amount of crit rate, since it's a bonus 3-piece on his console is going to be 16% crit damage. For the main stat, generally speaking, Lakshana main stat will be the higher damage, especially with his signature arc, which will give him a crit rate main stat, or even Camille Society. If you want to use the Battle Pass arc, then you do want to consider a crit rate main stat instead, so that you can stack on additional attacks, since the Battle Pass arc does not give you any additional crit rate. For the substat, it's going to be very standard for DPS, which is crit rate, crit damage, attack, as well as damage percent. Ideally, you get all 4, but as long as you get double crit, that's going to be the higher priority. Then, as I mentioned, his console bonus is going to be 16% crit damage for each type tree, so stacking crit rate for consistency is very important. In fact, generally speaking, if your crit damage is a little bit low, just to get a higher crit rate, it would give you better performance. So stacking crit rate for consistency is very important. And on top of that, like I mentioned, the Street Boxer's crit rate is going to be helping Chaos a lot in that department. And then remember that Hardcore can also give Chaos a 10% crit rate on top of the Remora extension 12 seconds, once again making Hardcore an excellent choice for Chaos. Then moving on to his arcs, is just going to be 3 main options. Either his signature arc, which is going to be What's Desire, followed by Fluff of Ferocity, which is going to be the Battle Pass arc, or Camellia Society. So in terms of importance, it's going to be signature over Battle Pass over Camellia Society. If you want to use Camellia, it does have a unique 25-second cooldown, which is going to be a pretty long time. I would get the S1 for Chaos because of a almost 20% damage drop-off for the next replacement being Camellia Society, or maybe even the Battle Pass arc. So regarding the actual S1, you do get a 20% Lakshana damage at only 1 dupe, as well as increasing the wearer's crit damage by 40% for 20 seconds, which is pretty much gonna have this at almost 100% uptime on top of the very important crit rate. Now, moving on to his dupes, I would say his most important dupe is going to be A6, where he immediately restores crime to the cap, which is 1000 crime after casting your retribution. If you were to get just a single dupe, then this is going to be the way to go, because his entire rotation will revolve around him casting his enhanced basic after you use his unique passive for the Romara burst with Hathor. Then between your second dupe, you can choose either A1 or A2. So for A1, it is going to give you an additional 40% crime if you're attacking enemies with Warren, which is going to be seen from his skill getting the unique buff to increase his damage. Other than that, for the A2, it's just going to be a straight up 20% defense ignore just to increase your overall damage. Now, while they are both really similar, and 2 technically could give you a lower damage than 1 if you're going to be able to make use of a higher EBA, 1 does require more field time with Chaos on top of actually hitting the target. So if the enemy moves around too much, or they just fly all over the place and just keep dashing all over the place, then you are not actually getting the full effect from this A1. So that is where you could potentially consider yourself the A2 if you're going to be going for the second dupe. Then A3 is gonna be increasing your crit damage at 20 seconds. Not too important because he is really gonna be getting a significant amount of crit damage from his arcs. Then A4 is gonna be transferring to a nearby target, which I personally don't think is gonna be too significant, especially if you're gonna be up against an elite. And then A5 is just gonna be 20% damage increase. This is specifically if you're up against a single elite. So if you're gonna be considering a third dupe, I would consider getting this A5 if you're gonna be going out for the bosses. So if order being established, if you're just thinking of getting a single dupe for Chaos, then A6 is going to be the most significant, and it is also a very nice stopping point, especially compared to the utility of A1 as well as A2, which is just some additional damage increase. Now, I do want to point out before we move over to his team building, because of the way that his ultimate skill work, you always want to make sure this warrant is applied because you can deal increased damage to your marked enemies, but you do not actually refresh this after casting your skill. So when you enter into combat for Chaos, always remember to cast your ultimate first if possible before casting your skill, just to give you additional damage output. Then moving on to the baseline team building for Chaos, the number 1 most important unit is definitely going to be Hathor, which is pretty much one of the best allies by tripling his passive Romara burst output as well as the additional crit rate. Hathor's nature of being a quick sword DPS is also really handy for an on-field DPS such as Chaos. For the other 2 teammates, you can kind of consider between whether you have the premium options. For the more accessible option, you can definitely run Zero as well as Haneo. For Zero, you can easily proc Esper cycles faster and rotate for a much faster Chaos Ultima uptime, notably from the charge mechanic if you are going to be using her with units like Jiuyuan. For Haneo, it is a more general slot for overall damage buffs as well as unlocking the stain effect for 12 seconds, 20% Lakshana damage taken. That being said, if you use this over an Anima unit like Jiuyuan, you will lose the 10 ultimate energy, so feel free to decide based on your combat experience if you want the additional ultimate or you want the additional damage. Then regarding Jiuyuan, she also has the best grouping mechanic within the game, which makes it very smooth, especially for Chaos's enhanced basic attacks as well as ultimate. If you want to, you could also consider using Hotori and Jiuyuan alongside with Hathor for the higher damage ceiling, which is going to be a full S-rank team, but they limit team building for your other teams, notably for your Nanali Bloom. So I would recommend this team if you actually skip Nanali and went for Lacrimosa for team 2, then you can open up Jiuyuan as well as Hotori and MC to be used with Chaos, which is a little bit ironic considering he's going to be using the almost exact same team with Nanali, with the key difference between changing out Zero for Hathor. If you want a more wheelchair team combo as well as just overall quality of life, you can definitely consider Fadia over Haneo just for one of the most comfortable shields that you have sustained in the entire game. So in summary, Chaos does have very strong burst damage capabilities, especially with its Remora burst alongside Hathor, as well as its enhanced basic attack, which will give you a lot of damage multiplier. You can also have a lot of crime, but the downside is you do not really have any way to extend this Remora enhancements besides using Hathor, so you pretty much always want to bind him with Hathor as of this current moment, unless they release additional supports for Chaos in the future. And one of the biggest issues I personally find when using Chaos is against bosses that generally just move around too much, because as long as you cannot hit the boss, then your crime uptime is going to be very slow, which is inevitably going to lead to your enhanced basic having a longer downtime, and that will definitely impact its overall damage capabilities as someone that heavily relies on the enhanced basic alongside with Remora. So with that, I pretty much come to the end of this quick little Chaos guide. Let me know what you guys think in the thoughts and comments down below. Word of the day is going to be here's not Chaos element. Join Twitch, join YouTube, join Discord, use code POKE of Gamer Subs. All the best for our gacha pools. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.